Hello, friends, and welcome. I am Percy Turner, and we are on our second Rise to the Challenge offering. This one, very specifically, is around solution-focused problem solving. I am going to allow another minute or so for folks to meander on in the room. And while I do so, I'm going to give you a couple little caveats. First of all, as I said, I am Percy Turner. I am a master social worker. I work for Wichita State University's Community Engagement Institute Center for Organizational Development. And so, what we are going to be doing today is just kind of talking through a new way, or perhaps a way that you're familiar with, of looking at problems in an appreciative light. The theme for this Rise to the Challenge series is appreciation. So we're going to be using appreciative inquiry for that. Um, and if you're not familiar with appreciative inquiry, it is the AI before AI. Hello, Ashton. Hello, Georgina. So glad that you are here. Feel free at any point to turn on your cameras. We don't necessarily require that, but it gives me a lot of energy. And use the chat. I read the chat, and that's something that I particularly enjoy doing, and understand that the best trainings, some of the learning will come from you and not from me. I have an hour to talk about a pretty complex topic, so I want to remind everybody that I'm going to be up here cooking. I'm going to be moving through information quickly. So, if you want more of an in-depth look into these ideas, we absolutely have that an offering for you in this free space. We only have about an hour, so it's going to be kind of an overview and more of a 101. We're not going to be able to get to the nuance that we'd like to get to, but I want to give you a taste of what we're capable of. Also, I want to challenge your way of thinking around problems. All this makes sense so far. One of the things that I will do every so often as I'm doing this, because I talk a lot, if you've met me before, you know I can't stop. I will be asking you to just toss emoji somewhere to make sure that you're still awake and with me. If you have any questions, concerns, or contentions, I will not shy away from them. Put them in the chat, right? I love the idea of challenging. Thank you for letting me know, Elise. And I was gonna look down on you. I really was. I was planning on being upset that you didn't have your camera on, but I'm glad that you let me know. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, Lindsay. So let's talk about some objectives. First thing that we're going to be doing is just building the case for typical problem solving and how it centers the problem as a focus. I'm going to tell you a story about this particular thing. You're not going to believe me, and I promise you it's true. But it talks about how much power problems have in our world. We're going to be talking about a way to shift that focus. And I'll talk about some of the consequences of centering problems, and we'll talk about how to shift that focus in using appreciative inquiry. We'll be talking about steps. I'll be trying to put the rubber to the road here. Again, we have about an hour. And so I'll be giving you some good conditions to utilize appreciative inquiry as a way to shift away from problem focus into solution focus. And we'll talk about what that means and how we go about starting that or planting that seed in our companies, in our teams, or even in our own practices at work. So, let's talk a little bit about how we think of problems, right? I'm going to line out these three ideas: problems as teachers, problems as milestones, and problems as a bonding agent. Now, be very clear, every one of these slides has a ton of words. If you'd like these slides to be given to you, we can give them to you in a PDF format. I'm not going to read slides word for word to you, right? The reason why I create these this way is so that at some point later, if you want this information, you'll have it. I'm just going to talk through them. I'll highlight some points and we'll keep going. So, if you think about yourself and you think about all of the things that you've learned in your professional career, I guarantee you, you will run into a wealth of problem solving stories, right? Ways that you have learned to personalize your work, ways that you have learned to excel in your position. A lot of these come from the place of solving problems. And so problems can teach us in a lot of ways. Problems are also not all problems are bad problems, right? Expansion, for example, gives us a unique problem in we have a less amount of capacity, we need to hire people, right? And when we start to hire people, we might see a whole other list of problems like what does our culture look like? How do we bring new people into an established system? These are problems, they're not necessarily negative things, right? So there may be some milestones that when we meet those milestones, we have a whole set of problems there. We call these problems we'd love to have, right? And the next one, problems as bonding agents. I think about relationships. Think about your best friend, right? Think about the person at work that you trust. Think about the organization, the team that you love. Most of these have stories that taught us that when the chips were down, we could trust each other, right? Like we had to go through something together to bond. There's a really great story about how trauma, both personal and organizational, puts us in the position to understand that we need each other because we cannot go through trauma alone. And so we reach out to each other in ways that we would never permit ourselves to do when we seek help. And so one of the things that I love to do, and if you've been to my trainings, you know, I authorize people to ask for help. Asking for help is not weakness, it's strength because we need each other, right? It's one of the reasons why I'm here. It's one of the reasons why you're here, right? We seek to learn from each other's experiences and us overcoming a lot of the things in our lives create a space where we can also help other people overcome, right? So there's a connective agent that happens here. Now, I'm going to tell you that all of this is making the case that problems have power. And I'm going to tell you a story that kind of cements this. I was talking with an unnamed partner uh, I was doing a training about communication, and during this training, this person said very specifically, I have something to say to you, and I don't know, if it's going to be okay. It's not going to sound great. And I said, that's fine. Don't worry. You're in a safe space. And she said, okay, make sure you don't tell anybody. And I said, of course. Close trap. I'm never going to tell anybody. She said, I miss COVID. And I said, I'm sorry, you missed the worldwide pandemic? Help me understand. And she said, I know how it sounds. I know how it sounds. But before COVID, our business dealt with about 3 or 4 people coming in a day, maybe 20 people a week. And that was like a busy week. 25 people was a busy week. During COVID, it was 500 people a week, easily. And we were swamped all the time. And we were desperate all the time. But during that time, we didn't argue, we didn't fight. All of our relationships improved. All of our work got done. By the end of every day, we might have been sweating and crying, but we got through it together and we finished everything. We signed every document. We had a system for every little thing because we didn't have a choice. In order for us to be what we needed to be as an organization, we had to be better than we'd ever had to be. And we rose to that challenge, right? And because of that, once these cases started kind of waning and we got back to having, 5 to 10 people, now I got to chase people down for signatures. Now I got to try and poke people to get stuff done. Nobody's motivated. We're starting to get drama back in the office again. I miss having a problem that centered everybody, that brought everybody together. And I hate to think of it that way, but I can't think of it any other way. And so this is trying to kind of really cement this idea of problems. We give problems an insane amount of power. The reason why we improve is because we're solving a problem. The reason why we deepen our bonds is because we're facing something together. The reason why we innovate is because we have something that our current system doesn't wrap itself around exactly. So we find new ways and we discover new things. But as my mother used to always say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So what does that very quietly say? In order for us to get any better with a system, we need something to challenge that system. We need a problem. And so I am trying to today give you the idea that we don't necessarily need a problem. We don't need to center our efforts around a problem to grow. We don't need adversity to grow. What if we could do these things without centering a problem? Because there are some issues when we center problems, and we'll talk about it, right? Traditional development efforts are about finding and fixing problems. So I'll ask you very simply, how many times have you reinvented the wheel? How many times have you solved the problem with a fantastic and amazing solution, and then once that problem was gone, you immediately dropped the solution and you went back to normal functioning? And then something else comes up and you're searching for a way to solve the problem and you realize, hey, we did this 6 months ago. Don't you remember when we did this before and it worked really well? And why did we ever stop doing that? Chances are we stopped doing it because the problem was gone. And that's the only reason why we identified the solution. We didn't add this into who we are. This wasn't part of our makeup or our DNA. It was a solution to the problem. So once the problem was gone, so was the solution. So very often we get back to what we call normal functioning and we don't grow and we don't do any of those things because we only did that to solve a problem. So what we're looking for is a way to stay motivated and think about growing our system and transforming our system without it being dependent on a problem that requires a solution. Because if we start focusing on the way that problems work and how we tackle these problems, there's a lot of learning that can be lost. Okay. So we have some wonderful things in chat here. Leah says, oh, it looks like people are asking for slides. Let's make sure that that gets done. Looks like Zane's on it. Leah says, when I worked at the newspaper and Reason Emmy, my editor and the other reporter, we became such good friends that when I go back to town, we have to meet at somebody's house because we all have this deep backstory that we add to each other's questions, which isn't appropriate to be shared with random. Or I get that 100%. Me with my to-do lists that I forget to use as soon as my workflow lessens. Yeah, then we start falling apart. Once the workload hits we get really organized, we get really jazzed, we get all of these things in the face of problems. And then when those problems go away, we don't keep that learning, right? Because we don't need it anymore. We're going back to normal functioning. Wonderful. So let's keep going. So think about it yourself. I'll give you about 2 minutes to reflect. What are some problems you're facing in your work right now? You don't have to put this anywhere. You don't have to write this down. I just want you to think about what is currently happening in your world and what you are doing to address those things or what you've done in the past to address those things. One of the things that I love to do when I'm working with organizations is go back in their history and look at all the solutions that are in the graveyard. Look at all of the things that they used to do to address problems that they used to have and try and revitalize some of those things. What can we bring back? What are some things that fell by the wayside because we didn't need them anymore that we actually should have kept as part of our culture or as part of the way we do things? So many solutions could still be used or effective today, but because we went back to normal functioning, we forgot them. So thinking about some of these things, what are you currently doing? How many times over the last few years have you asked, hey, have we done this before? Does anybody have experience with this particular thing? Give it another couple seconds. It's really hard for me to be quiet. Okay, now I'm going to ask you to maybe look at this another way. When have you done your best work? What skills did you use? What partnerships did you make? What did you encounter during those times that you still use? So the most Yes, I do. Thank you, Ashton. I do have a class that states to be comfortable in silence. You're absolutely right. And right now I have competing values, which is another class that I have of time versus comfortability, right? So I'd love to have that conversation. And maybe the next Rising to the Challenge, we'll talk about competing values and things like that. So thinking about the learning that you've done, when you've done your best work, how far away from you is that memory when you did your best work? Three different times that you've done your absolute best work. When you were in top form, what skills did you use? What partnerships did you make? And what did you learn about yourself? And do you still hold on to those things today? Are you still that person that was doing your best work? Do you still use those skills? Do you still have those partnerships? How much of your success, both professionally and personally, is due to that time or those times when you were doing your best work and putting those skills into practice? When a problem comes along, what do you focus on more? Changing yourself because of the problem, or looking at when have I been at my best, and how can my best tackle this problem? So that's the juxtaposition I'm trying to put you guys in. The idea of problems as powerful things that we need to find individual solutions that only work for this problem, and yourself as the best version of you, utilizing everything that you know, going to tackle a problem and never leaving behind the best version of yourself. Because the best version of you shouldn't change whether you have problems or not. Right? So the strengths that you have, you don't put down. But if they're around a problem and not around you, then we tend to put these things down. If we're doing things based on solving problems, once the problem is done, that's it. But if we're growing ourselves, then we grow whether we have a problem or not. Then we are we hold the learnings that we have, whether there are problems or not. Right? Your organizational skills, your all the great things that make you a dynamic worker, those things don't need to change because you don't necessarily have a problem right now. You're still an incredible, talented, resourceful human being. Right? So if we think about this in terms of investing in ourselves rather than investing to fix a problem, we may get a better result in terms of our learning, and we might not put them down as easily or as quickly. I think it's hard for me to recognize slash celebrate my best work because I'm overly critical of myself. I really, really appreciate this, Kendra. And I honestly believe that, especially you, because I know you, right? We know each other. If you were like a stranger, I would say some empty stuff. But I kind of know you, and I know that if you take away the judgment of self, so the easiest way for to do this would be to look at the results that you have, the relationships that you have, and if you were to put this, let's say, let's look at another name. So let's say Justin told you about all of the things that he had done, you would consider that person accomplished, right? So if you depersonalize, if you take away, because one of the things we do when it comes to ourselves is we think about our potential and we say, well, I could have done that better, right? If Justin was telling you, hey, I worked for 3 years doing this thing, you'd be like, that's amazing. You wouldn't be like, why didn't you go for 4, buddy? Because that's not how we talk to each other. That's how we talk to ourselves, but that's not how we talk to each other. Right. And I have a whole training about this particular thing. As a matter of fact, that was our last Rise to the Challenge. We were talking about appreciation for self and how we can go about removing the shameful part of, but I could have been doing better, but I could have been doing this differently, but I could have had this or had that. And just taking the result that we have and looking at that and celebrating that. So sometimes we might need to depersonalize and say, if I met a woman who did all the things that you've done, I would celebrate that woman. If I met a man who did all the things that you've done, I'd celebrate that man. And if I met anybody who did all the things that you do, I would celebrate them. Does that make sense? And so removing just a little bit taking one step back from identifying it as you. Amy said, I have found I do my best work when I am fully informed and feel like I have a good grasp on knowledge and expectations. I tend to stall out when I do not have 100% clarity. It is probably annoying how many questions I can ask about about the same thing, but my brain gets stuck if I don't know what I'm doing. This concept, I love, right? But it's about knowledge of self. It's about so that knowledge of self doesn't change. So when you go into a problem, you know, here's what I need. I need this to move forward because if you look at yourself as the solution, you're strengthening yourself. Every bit of information you learn about the problem, you're strengthening the solution, right? And that doesn't change. Every problem that you attack, you're going to attack in a very similar way. What do I need to be at my best to handle this situation? Right? Okay, one more, Leia. I think with me, I do always try to embody that quote, every day I get better and better mentality. Sometimes I think I judge my metrics based on what other people say, but also if someone says this is great and I see this was bad, I found myself devaluing praise that they give me, i.e., I did a project and when I watched it, I thought it was bad. And so it's like, what do you mean this was good? No, it wasn't. Have you been lying to me? So we are all in different metrics. I want to be very clear about this too, right? And judging yourself is not the focus of this particular thing, but I want to make sure that you are aware that what may be good to me because you can do things I can't do, right? Leia is somebody who has extensive writing experience. So what you might think is slop in terms of your writing because you've done much better, it might be the greatest thing I've ever read because I don't have the writing experience you do. And I'm not going to judge you based on the criteria by which you would judge yourself. All right. So when you thought about problems that you were facing and what you've tried and what you haven't tried, how did that feel? And did you focus more specifically on process? I tried to engage these people, I tried to do X, Y, and Z. Or did you focus? I mean, how did you focus? What did you focus on? And then did anything change when you thought about how you do your best work? Uh, Again, I just want you to think about this. When you center problems as the focus, one of the things that we begin to do is think about process, and we tend to think about all the things we can't do, all the things that aren't right, all the things that we're unable to change, and we take shelter in those things, right? Well, this is a management problem. Well, this is a financial problem. This is a budget problem. These are things that are outside of my control, right? And so a lot of then once we kind of get into that mindset of these problems have a whole bunch of things that I can't necessarily affect, we kind of take away our agency and we don't think about what we can do to affect. When I was doing my best work, I was talking to financial people. When I was doing my best work, I was establishing relationships with policymakers and things like that, right? So I wouldn't just say, well, if that's a policy issue and I don't have anything to do with policy. When I was doing my best work, I was authorizing myself to speak up about things that were out of my control. So I wouldn't take shelter in, well, there's nothing I can do about this. It's not in my skill set. At my best self, I don't have a skill set. I'm learning. I'm absorbing as many things as I possibly can, right? And so I authorize myself to be more confident in doing some of these things when I am focused on me doing my best work. Amy says I had a similar problem in grad school as a research student. I could never decide when, quote, the work was really done. But I also tend to go down rabbit holes when I learn new things in my research. So there's that. So, okay, let's keep going. When problems become the focus, and this is just me kind of distilling a lot of what I've already said. When problems become the focus, they get bigger than we are. They get bigger than they really are, right? History begins to repeat itself. We see culture getting affected. We see problem solvers become reactive, right? And what we do is we see people, instead of working, they are just waiting for the next problem to happen. Right. And you can almost see that shift, and you can see the shift in the way that people get their work done when they are waiting for the next thing. I have worked with people and consulted with people who have said out loud, I'm just waiting for the next thing to catch on fire. I don't even get to do my job, right? I sneak in times to do my own job between problem solving. I'm just waiting for the next thing to happen. So me doing my job, answering my emails, this is like the intermission between the next thing that I have to go solve or fix or change because I am a problem solver. And so then we get into a space where if there aren't problems, we miss them because problems are what activated us. We got into this space of the only time that I'm really activated in doing my best work is when I'm solving a problem. If there aren't any problems, I feel devalued. I feel disempowered. I have a whole training about supervision and how, in some cases, your micromanaging supervisor is just looking to problem solve because that's what they used to do. They used to have a new employee who always needed help, and now you don't need help anymore. And so they're just kind of, hey, did you need some help? Hey, did you want? Hey, would you maybe you want to think of it this way? Because they're used to and they've identified that their best work was when they were helping you along. And so now you don't need any help. And they don't know how to deal with that. And that transition is difficult for everybody involved, right? So this is what we're talking about here. We also can find ourselves being disinterested in being proactive, in solving problems before they, right? We can find ourselves telling us, well, we don't have the capacity to develop unless there's something going on. Unless there's a problem, I'm not getting any better. My job is to be as relaxed as possible because there's always problems. And so I'm going to spend all of my time just surviving. And this is where burnout lives, right? There's problems every day. I have to reserve all of my energy for tackling problems that haven't shown up yet. So I'm not going to develop myself. I'm not going to try and get any better. I'm not going to do any of those things. I'm going to be idle when there are no problems so that I can have all of my energy to solve problems. We also can be in a space where we see success as a product of change. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. Um, it's not my problem. Yeah. So that's one thing I don't like to hear. I don't like to hear the it's not my problem. Um, I know that we can't fix the world, but if it's in our skill set, we should offer something, not just walk away. Absolutely. Thank you for the idea about learning and absorbing. I really enjoy problem solving. I agree. Uh, Carol, hi Carol. Carol said, I appreciate when I first started here, leadership insisted that anyone could provide input. They were open to all points of view. Even as a new hire, we're up to share our thoughts and questions without fear. Love this. You will find that as we authorize ourselves to do our best work, we find ourselves being less afraid of the consequences of sharing. Especially when we come from a space of not trying to usurp authority. And that's one of I have a whole training specifically around communication without usurping authority. So when we see success, if problems are the focus, we see success as a product of change. What we're doing isn't enough to address the problem. We have to change what we're doing, right? So a lot of our change, and if you look back at the history of your organization or your team, you might find that the idea of we've always done things this way, it was originally to address a problem. And once that problem was gone, we just kind of continue doing things a way that doesn't make sense or a way that doesn't apply anymore. And so we have so many things that are just built based around problem solving. We conceptualize change as the development of something new or the extinguishing of current behavior, right? So how do we affect change? This training, very specifically, what we're trying to avoid is creating a culture where development is reactive and not proactive. We want to make sure that problems aren't the source or cause of change because we don't want to be inadvertently giving problems power. We don't want to downplay development to be problem solving only. So in this regard, if let's say, and I'll pull, let's say Melissa, Brenda, myself and Alex are all on a team and we're tasked with solving a particular problem, right? The success of that team will be if the problem is solved. And once the problem is solved, then hooray for all of us. But then what happens to our team? What's the purpose of our team, right? If we have been put together as a task force to solve something, once that thing is solved, the task force is dissolved, and the learning that we have, it's on us to take that and apply it in other places. It is not centered as the thing that is celebrated and centered is that we no longer have the problem, not that four people came together and learned this new stuff. And so it becomes much easier for us to kind of forget our time together and the stuff that we learned and the stuff that we used to do, unless there is a similar problem. And then we'll do the same thing over again, right? And so there are many, this is why I said in the very beginning of this, there are many times where we will reinvent the wheel and we will absolutely learn the same thing over and over again because we put it down. We didn't need it anymore once the problem was over. So we're not trying to suggest that we stop dealing with problems or we stop facing problems. We're looking at it from the solution is you, and we want to focus on the solution. We don't want to focus on the problem as the main character. We want to focus on our development and we want to focus on us, our partnerships, our team, and our skills as solutions. So that's the thing. And how do we do that? We do that by using something called appreciative inquiry. Now, I didn't create appreciative inquiry, so I want to be very clear about this. This isn't something that I came up with in the basement. This was something that was developed by David Cooper, and it was in association with the Cleveland Clinic. And so it is based in strength, right? It is a strengths-based approach, and it always starts with what's going well. We're always going to start with what are we doing well? What are we good at? And in this regard, we will, instead of how big is the problem, how does the problem show our deficits, and how can we create something that we don't have, and all of the issues that come with that, it's more about what are we doing well, and how can we apply what we're doing well to what we're facing right now, right? And so we're always getting into that space of where are we strong? Right. And this is used from small teams all over the place to Fortune 500 companies. Problem solving in and of itself, one of the big things that we fail to do is we fail to have a working knowledge of our team's capabilities. Right now, think for just a minute. Do you know what the person next to you, what they're capable of, what their training is in, what they care about, what they're passionate about? The last thing that they learned that is in relation to the field that you work in, right? Do we have a working inventory of the skills and the passions that our teammates have, that our supervisors have, that our supervisees have, right? Outside of their specific job positions. So Kendra, I'm going to pick on you just a little bit. I know, for example, that Kendra has a background and has a good understanding of social media and has a good understanding of engagement principles. Kendra's very, very good at this. So that's not the only thing that Kendra does, but that's something that Kendra brings to everything that Kendra does. And if I know that about Kendra, and I know, hey, I want to make, I have for example, I've been meaning to talk to you for a minute, so I'm just going to take a second to do this. We have a LinkedIn page that I want to get more engagement in. And every time I go on LinkedIn, I see something that Kendra's done. I see pictures that Kendra has. I see things that I know Kendra is good at because I have gotten to, and it's not that I'm quietly stalking Kendra, I am, but that's not the point of today's training. The idea here is just knowing that she's passionate about this particular thing. This is not something that when I work with Kendra, we work on, but I can learn from Kendra and I can understand some of the stuff Kendra does. Leah in our chat has said multiple times that she's worked for the paper. If I wanted writing advice, I would go to her. Kendra is not currently working for the newspaper, but she brings that wherever she goes. The strength that she has, I might not be aware of. And as somebody who's working next to another, I might have no idea. Carol knows about website design, right? These are things that they're not in their general job duties, but they were a passion that they particularly have. And they are skills that are being unused. Michelle says, does the idea of problem solving that you used to be the micromanaging supervisor for also apply to people who reach out often to colleagues to see if they need help? Yes, Michelle, yes, you're absolutely correct. Um, and there's more to it than that. So I don't want you to think that that's the only thing, but yes, it can apply. A lot of people asking for slides. Love that. Melissa says, I tell Kendra I live vicariously through her social media posts. Absolutely. Right. So what skills do we have? What skills? How can we be students of our teammates? How can we learn from them and the skills that they have and the things that they bring to the position? Because a lot of us have a lot of skills that are unused, right? I've been supervising people since I was in my early 20s. I don't supervise anybody. They don't let me supervise anybody here, right? But I have a lot of those skills. I have a lot of people skills, right? Um, so when we ask about skills, we're not talking about job. We're not saying what do you do for your job. We're not saying what are you getting paid to do. We're talking about when's the last time you really went down the list and talked about things that you are comfortable with, skills that you have. Right? So to enact appreciative inquiry, we cannot be appreciative if we don't know. Right? We can't say, what are we doing well if we don't know what we do well. And what we do well is more than a collection of the problems that we've solved. And I want to be very, very clear about this. Right? So I just went through this whole thing for a little more than a half an hour talking about how we cannot let problems be our focus. So I don't want you to think that the way that we get into appreciative inquiry is looking at all the problems that we've solved. You've done more than solve problems. Right? And your staff have done more than solve problems, and they have skills and have fostered skills outside of problem solving. So it is being more expansive than that. Okay. So, okay. Let's talk about our five. Let's talk about our 5 phases. This is how it's done. We're getting to the rubber meets the road, right? So, first thing we're going to do, we have to have it has to be a collective decision to focus on the positive. And the way that we can do this is by inventorying parts of our history when we were effective. When were we really doing well? And talk deeply about this by asking some good questions. What are some stories we tell about these moments? And what are some stories that people outside of our team tell about these moments? Right? So those are two very different things. How we see ourselves and how others see us are two very different things. And so we want to collect both sides of the story. We want to have an understanding of what we believe and then what others have seen from us. Then we want to identify the meaning behind these. We want to theme this. We want to get meaning from the stories that people have shared, both inside and outside of our team. And we want to theme these out. When are we at our most energized? When are we able to do our best work as a team, as an organization, so on and so forth, right? And then from there, based on these things, what's possible? So if we have a team, for example, I just recently did a Clifton Strength Assessment with a group, and we found that we had a whole lot of people who were very, very, very organized and very good at being decisive. And yet we're sitting in this thing going, well, which direction, which way should we go? Right. And what we found was that a lot of these people in their strengths, they didn't want to take over the conversation. So nobody wanted to make a decision because they knew once they made a decision, they would want to run with it. Right. So we had to authorize staff to access their strengths. Right. Let's go through, let's make a decision, let's talk it through. And once people were able to recognize that individually we all shared these particular strengths, it became very possible to make a good decision. It became very possible to find points to agree with, to find common grounds and all these things, because we first took an inventory of our strengths. And once we did that and we said, hey, it looks like everybody here is really passionate about this particular thing. Once we had, from that point, what's possible becomes incredible. It becomes an incredible question, right? What can our organization be based on the strengths and the stories and the history that we have? What inspires us to change? And then again, the same thing is true. Once we take all of that history that we have and we put it in this positive light, what are we capable of? Then it's committing to those things, right? Because now we don't have pipe dreams. Now we have things that are rooted in the strengths that we have. So we're not just saying, wouldn't it be great if we could offer X, Y, and Z service? What we're saying is we find that our staff have strength in this place. We can leverage these strengths in these ways. And so now we're not talking about this kind of pie in the sky approach. We're talking about we have a group of people who are strong in this particular way. And so it would follow naturally and logically for us to make a commitment to continue doing something that we're good at. Right? What can we offer toward our vision? And then what do we need from each other? Now, this is another really, really great thing, but it only works well if we have a good inventory of our strengths. Chances are, if I unleashed this entire room as a learning collaborative, you would learn so much from each other's experiences. One of the reasons why I said hop in the chat, right? Talk to each other because you're going to find a lot of really great learning from, there are 82 professionals in here. I'm one of them. Right? So if we look at it just from the law of numbers, you're going to learn more from the 81 other people collectively than you're ever going to learn from me. So if we identified strengths and we had an understanding of what everybody, in the same way, if you understood everybody's strengths like you were understanding me talking right now, you would have an incredible library of resources. Right? And this is what's possible when we start appreciating and understanding the teams that we're a part of, right? Because now you're not just working alone. It's not just you versus a problem. It's you and every skill that you have and every skill that you know that your team has versus a problem, right? And that only grows because your skills only grow and develop as you use them. So how do we put this into action? Love this quote. The task of leadership is to create an alignment of strengths in a way that makes the system's weaknesses irrelevant. Now, I want to be very clear about this. That doesn't mean you don't work on your weaknesses. That doesn't mean you ignore your weaknesses. It means that you can still be strong while adding strength, while addressing things that you might struggle with. Right? So we're still going to do good work based on the strengths that we have, and we're going to use those strengths also to address everything else. The things that we struggle with, they are not going to stop us. So, okay. Let's look at it from a classic to a new way. All of this can be immensely transformative in our teams and departments. It's a reframe of what we already know / do, but better and more efficient and happier team members. Using our strengths to improve problems, mind blown. I wish this was a natural thing. And, but so let's look at how it might actually look, right? Classic. We have a problem. What do? We learn about the problem. We learn about what's wrong and we learn about who's responsible. We become afraid of problems, right? Because we also don't want to be blamed for them. So we tentatively kind of tiptoe into learning what's wrong, learning who's responsible for fixing it. And then, okay, so what does it look like moving forward? We've established what the problem is. We've established who carries responsibility. We've established who's going to fix it. Go forth. From the experimental, and I love using the word experiment here because learning is about going from a space of incompetence to competence, and you need to experiment to be able to do that, right? So we have a problem. First thing we're going to ask ourselves is, what are we good at? What strength can we draw to change the situation? Let's dig into who has transferable skills, who is going to learn more. Now we've established strengths, we've established what we can do, we established what we're good at. Now let's figure out how to fix it. I'll give you a really simple example of this. How many of you have had to install or use new software in the last 5 to 10 years? Get a new accounting system, right? And so, Georgina, oh, are you raising your hand to say yes, or do you have a question or a concern?
Just saying.
So you had to use this. Now, in every group that I've ever been a part of, there's always at least one person who says, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. I've been using the old system for 14 years. I'm not doing it. I hate the old system. The old system doesn't work. It has a whole bunch of bugs, but I know it and I know it well. Right. And so it took me this long to get to a point where I could use the old system passively. And now you want this whole newfangled garbage system, and it doesn't do everything the old system used to do. And so they are averse to some kind of learning. How do you deal with this? One of the big things that I have learned to do is to identify, hey, the fact that you learned the old system proves that you can learn systems. You have a whole bunch of experience on the computer. There is a strength that you have in the system. Your ability to navigate the old system is not a weakness, it's a strength. It is proof that learning works for you. So, how can we center the idea that you have learned this system and you went through these great pains to do so in order to help you get a leg up on the new system? You know how computers work. You know what shortcuts are. We can walk through this from a place of strength. And we walk through it from a place of strength, you will see that people become much more amenable to change because they already have the fundamental skills. If it's a computer system and you've been using computers the majority of your life, guess what? You have some strength already. I don't have to explain to you in the base things. And one of the things about learning in change is that people don't like to feel incompetent. And when you learn something new, you're going from a space of competence to a space of incompetence. And so we want to lessen that blow as much as possible by centering strength, by giving people the tools to authorize themselves to think of themselves as strong, to think of themselves as well. No, I'm not starting from scratch. I'm not starting all over again. I hear that so often. Percy, I just don't want to start all over again. Well, you're not. You're not starting from zero. And in an appreciative framework, there's very, very rare and few times where you're starting from no skill. There's always something to show your strength. Right? And that's what we're looking at. And that's what we're looking for. And that's how we can reframe something as difficult and convoluted as new learning, right? Always want to look at what strengths we have and taking some of these helpful conditions is again, AI, I'm so sorry. I didn't know that, artificial intelligence was going to take off the way that it did. So when we're talking about appreciative inquiry here, we're not talking about artificial intelligence. We first want to acknowledge current difficulties without assigning blame. And we want to collaborate on designing solutions rooted in our strengths. Congruence of means and ends, the questioning process and the end results need to be congruent. Success is a good source of innovation. This is another really good way to make sure you are grounded in your strength, right? Every success you have is motivation to keep going, which is why if you look at any of the paradigms around success and small wins, and that's what all of that is saying, that if you take your small wins and appreciate them, that will help push you forward and give you confidence to tackle new things, right? Focus beyond your event, right? Learning and change are ongoing processes. When you solve a problem, you should be having some kind of debriefing meeting that centers your learning. What did you learn from this? What will you carry forward from this? So that you don't ever have to rediscover something you already discovered because the problem is different. Stories over numbers. Stories are valued for their ability to share meaning, right? And so this is why I didn't say when we went back and we were talking about inquiring into positive moments, I didn't say give me data. Don't tell me how many units you've sold. Don't tell me how much money you've made, right? Tell me about the content that is deeper than that. And this is why we say stories over numbers. Stories are valued for their ability to share meaning in a way that numbers and figures just fail at doing. If you don't believe me, There is a reason why people use iPhones, and it ain't because iPhones are the best phones. Anybody here use an iPhone? I do. I'm an iPhone person. There are some iPhone people here. Thank you so much for being iPhone people. Here's the deal. iPhones are not the best phones. They don't have the most memory. They don't have the best features. There's a lot of things that iPhones lack. And that does not matter to an iPhone user because this company has told a story that we buy into, that we believe. They have personalized things for iPhone users. I'm so yes, yeah. Your screen is not dirty, Carol. That's my. Can I give some examples? Some examples of what? Oh, of why iPhones are great. We use after action reports after major events. This seems to help as it focuses on our strengths and what we did great. Then, if we had missteps, how can we use our strengths and skills to make changes for next time? That would just be working on skills in an area, making procedure policy changes, etc. So, one of the things that I remember that was really, really like impactful in terms of the iPhone world is the idea of iMessages and FaceTiming. So these things are things that when iPhones advertise, they advertise community. They don't advertise like, well, the internet is this and the pixels are this and like they are more about connection. How do iPhones connect with each other? How do people who use iPhones connect with each other, right? They're not saying, hey, we have the most gigabytes and you're going to have the most memory ever and you're going to store them and we have the fastest this and that. They try to appeal to the idea that you're part of a community and that community cares about meeting each other, connecting with each other, and that sort of stuff. If iMovie was still good, I might have bought a MacBook, but I learned that, right? Yeah, so I would rather a $500 computer with $80 of software more than a $1,000 MacBook with other programs that I don't work well on. Hey, I'm not gonna argue with you on that one. And I'm also not getting paid by Apple, so I'm not gonna do any more than that. Bailey says, not sure where this question fits, but I wanted to put it here before I forgot it. How do you utilize the solution-focused problem-solving methods if this practice is not readily accepted for everyone in the company you work for? For instance, they might expect that a problem gets solved right away, not allowing time to access skills, make a better plan, or change the way things have been done in the past. So I love this question. And give me just 1 second. Let me get through this other slide, and I absolutely got your back on this. All right. So the big thing here and the point of our training, people have to know these things. They have to know they belong. They have to feel valued. They have to know the organization and their community, or where they're headed. They have to know that excellence can be depended on. Right? And this is an expectation that we do our best, that we strive to be at our best self. And they have to know that they are contributing to something greater than themselves. And so here's a simple start here. The 4 I's are the starts that I can appreciate. Asking people to share their stories, focusing on stories of success, right? Including people in that process creates that sense of belonging, and then sharing these stories and being generous with your appreciation and encouraging others to do the same. So this starts the answer. This is why I wanted to get to this slide, because it starts me answering your question, Bailey. What we want to do is we're focused on culture. And what I mean by that is we should not start using this when we have a problem. We shouldn't be introducing a new thing when we have a problem. If we want this framework to really take hold, we have to start outside of this should be part of our everyday. So, for example, we want a problem to be solved right away. I agree with that, right? What we should be doing as an ongoing practice is taking an inventory of skills. That's something that we should always be kind of, anytime you go to supervision, anytime you're in an all staff meeting, anything like that, there should be time and energy dedicated to reminding each other of the skills and passions that we have, right? So that when a problem comes in, we can already have hey, does anybody know anything about this? Just that question alone hey, does anybody know anything about, we have some computer problems, we have some system errors. Does anybody know anything about computers? Anybody have a particular passion for this particular thing? Anybody starting with some good there, right? And the more that we know about skills, the more that we ask about skills, the more that we authorize people to say, yes, I do, right? We've talked about this. So there is that. Also, we can also start it from, and it can grow out of the typical response. So if you are working with a company that cares about results and quick and this and that, then talking about debriefing meetings, right? And starting it from there. So once the problem gets solved, we have a debriefing meeting to make sure that we are distilling the skills that we got from solving the problem and appreciating that, and starting from that space could put us in a place where now we're starting to ask more questions about the skills that we have. Or we start reviewing, right? Because a lot of companies have this review period. And I'm going to be very honest, the companies that I've worked for are not very good about the yearly review period. We don't really use that information very well. So if we could use that information very well to talk about what have we learned over the year? What are 4 new skills that we've put into place because of the way this year is shaken out? What are new areas of interest because of the way this year is shaken out, right? So it doesn't have to start in the space of immediately getting to problem solving. It can start slower, and it can start as a cultural movement. Cultural movements take time. This is one of the reasons why people shy away from them, because they take time and energy, and change is incremental when it comes to cultural change. It isn't just okay, I went to this training, I know how to do this, it's done, we do things differently now. Usually you want to start slow so that it doesn't feel like things are being forced on folks. So paying attention to what skills you've learned, very, very important. Creating space where we tell stories about the skills that we have that are outside, or the passions that we have that are outside of our static job duties, very important. And then being able to ask questions when we get a problem, being able to ask questions about our strengths from an informed perspective, you have a good start. Right. And again, and I'll say this, and I believe it firmly, success is a great form of motivation. So your company is dedicated to success. And if success looks like taking an extra minute to make sure that we are empowering employees, once we see success in this way, people are much more likely to buy in. But people are not likely to buy into things that they don't see success from. So start it slow, use it from a cultural standpoint, and then highlight successes when you see those successes happen. And remember that, hey, it was Georgina's passion for this that really gave us that extra leg up on this particular problem. Hey, it was the fact that we learned that Ashton was really good at blank that put us in the spot to be competitive around this area, right? And so, what would happen if we knew more about what Georgina likes and what Ashton likes and what Zane likes and what Amanda likes, right? So, framing it in terms of success can be very, very persuasive. Does that make sense, Bailey? Did I give you some pointers as to how we can get this thing started? Okay, that's what I got. We got about 2 minutes. Michelle said, you mentioned, and I am paraphrasing, that often the celebration is that the problem is solved, not that people came together to solve a problem. How do you balance that approach with identifying, how do you balance that approach with identifying the challenges and possible missteps? Ooh, I love this. So, Michelle, that is an absolutely fantastic question. One of the things to make sure of, and especially during a debriefing meeting, right? What we want to do is we want to look at problem solving not as a static thing that ends when the problem ends. We want to look at it in terms of moving forward. So moving forward, what do we need to do? What do we need to continue doing? What do we need to do less of to ward ourselves, right? To keep our strengths where they are, or to grow our strengths beyond the point where we are at currently. So when we are talking about, when we're at that point where a problem is solved, right? We want to identify that we've gotten to this space where we have overcome this particular problem. Here's the strengths that we used, and here's how we can leverage those strengths better in the future. So there may be some missteps, and this is why I love using the word experiment. We've experimented with this, we tried to use our strengths in this way or that way, and maybe they worked and maybe they didn't work, and maybe we had to kind of go back. Now, one of the things that we're going to do, and there is strength in learning from those missteps. Right. So, one of the things that we really, really struggle with is we start judging ourselves immediately when somebody says anything other than you did great. Right. So, if there are missteps, one of the things that we start to do is we start to pull back and get defensive. So, learning from those missteps is what we're centering, not the fact that missteps were made, but more that, hey, we're stronger now because we realize that we tried it in this approach, we moved too fast, or we focused on X instead of Y, right? And so we're always adding that to our knowledge base and strengthening ourselves based on that learning. So centering the learning from the missteps is much more important than the misstep itself. It doesn't matter who did it, it matters who learned from it. Brittany, can I? Oh, yeah. So, for those of you who are still here, thank you for being here. This will get uploaded to YouTube. And so, CEI has a YouTube page where all of these are taken. And so, you can bring anybody to those and you can watch me or any other person who's done a Red Solo challenge in the past. If you want, you can email Zane May. If you still haven't gotten on the list to get the slides, email Zane May. Zane May will get that to you. Thank you so much, Amy. I really, really appreciate you. Um, yeah, I have so much fun. I'm up here having a good time. I hope that you guys have nearly as much of a good time as I have. Please enjoy the rest of your day. Do something to take care of yourself before you lay your head on your pillow this evening, and we will see you next time. We do have more of these. So come on back, tell your friends. Have a great day.